You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings. Great deal going on right now. You throw down $1 on an NFL game. And you know what? If either team scores and you're a new customer, you get $100 in free plays. Guess what? Some team's going to score. So hop on there. With John Schuster, I am Mike Luke. All right, I already got comments coming hot and heavy. But first and foremost, this was a game, Shu, and Arizona ends up winning by about 30. That when I watched Wyoming in the lead up to the game, when I watched some of their players, Wyoming to me did not look like a bad basketball team. But you know what they were against Arizona? They were an overmatched basketball team, and that was readily apparent very quickly.
I think one of the frustrating things for me coming into this situation here is that all I've heard for the last few days is Mike Luke trying to nitpick Arizona basketball. And I'm sure the many folks who are joining us on the post game here at DraftKings have noted the same thing. Mike Luke constantly criticizing Arizona can't shoot from the three. Just not a very good shooting team. Can't shoot from the outside. Going to be an issue for Arizona. Just can't make those long three-point shots. And then I think what happened is that the Arizona basketball team as a collective was watching the DraftKings live stream, probably from their luxurious McHale Center locker room. And they were probably listening afterward to the DraftKings podcast where Mike Luke was doing nothing but berating Arizona's woeful three-point shooting. So, as any decent team who is in need of motivation would utilize, the Wildcats decided we're going to show him. And show Mike Luke they did, especially early on in the game. 3 after 3 after 3 after 3 all over the place from every conceivable angle from a variety of different performers. Arizona blew this thing open. And yes, Mike, you are correct. I think Wyoming's going to be a 20-game winner that's going to be very representative in its conference and has a chance to get into the NCAA tournament. There's some good players on that team.
I totally agree with that. And if both of us are agreeing on something, we're either incredibly wrong or maybe we're actually right on this.
Well, every once in a while, the acorn gets lucky.
Yes, the acorn does.
I'm not entirely sure what that means, but acorns, I guess, deserve a little luck along the way, too. But Arizona was very impressive again. And I know you were in the venue. I was watching it from the Pac-12 Network feed, and Don McClain, who was doing color commentary, is one of a number of people who have kind of jumped onto the bandwagon saying that it isn't just a good team and this isn't simply an illusion.
It's different.
Arizona's on another level right now. And the really good news is that we're going to see Arizona against legitimate competition. And again, Wyoming, I think, is pretty good. They were undefeated coming in. Their schedule was junk. Arizona's wasn't a particularly good schedule either. And I think that's, despite how other than Mike Luke wanting to berate their, inconsistent three-point shooting, Arizona's schedule has been the one knock that has been, kind of an issue up to this point. And again, that changes. But this was a very impressive performance against an undefeated basketball team that was overmatched at McHale Center.
Okay, so let's get to some comments here, and what this really is what makes it, and I think this is what's so unique. We've already got 25 comments on here, and we're like 4 minutes in. So first of all, our guy Jacob Franklin, who is maybe the tallest person I know, is the producer that makes everything happen behind the scenes. He is the one. A lot of people think that I was the one that made Tony's takes.
Right.
So, that was Jacob Franklin.
It was Jacob Franklin, the Jacob Franklin.
Listen to this back and forth. He says, I'm terrified of how badly they're going to beat ASU. And then my guy Nick Howard responds and says, Jacob, you must be referring to Grand Canyon tomorrow. We'll get to that one. By the way, I'm going to be on that post game. I'm very excited about
I've heard you are. Yeah.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit first and foremost about Benn Mathurin. Now it seems is at the point now where he's just getting. Oh, and by the way, I love your Benny Mardonis over your left shoulder right there. That's fantastic.
Well, this game, as you're well aware, Mike, was deep into the night.
Yeah, it was deep into the night. I don't know that there was any 16-year-olds out there though.
But Arizona was moving offensively like there was a magic carpet. So
right.
It all comes around.
Okay, but Benn Mathurin though, and watching it up close, he's different athletically. He is a guy that, it seems now that he's getting 5 to 6 explosive dunks every single game. I mean, now maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but he is a colossal mismatch out there from an athleticism / strength perspective. And I'm going to be very curious to see how he does with with Arizona going into playing Illinois later on Saturday. That to me is going to be a real test, but he looks like he might have hit a different, propulsion.
We could go with propulsion. What the heck? Let's roll with the propulsionist, Benn Mathurin. That doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but he has he has been very impressive. And I think you noted this last year. A lot of other folks did the same, that Mathurin was the best athlete on the team and looked like he certainly could play at the next level. That the good news is that it appears that he will be able to match athleticism with any team he's up against. And that's something that, as this thing moves along, that Arizona's going to need. And it's nice to see somebody who can be a front runner in regards to a willingness to be able to get his points, and a lot of other, I'm not even sure it's a supporting cast, because there are a lot of other guys on this team who are scoring with some nice outlets as well. Kerr's performance was outstanding as well. And so, yeah, it's nice to see Mathurin play well, and Arizona as a whole. It's another outstanding game. And Arizona, I think Sean just mentioned this in one of the comments there. Arizona's dominance in the early stages determined how this game was going to be.
Okay, Kenny Abbey, a guy who nobody backs the A more than my guy Kenny. He's trying to get in here. Kenny, all you got to do is get onto YouTube and just type in a comment, and it'll show up right here on the screen. And I'll take care of that, make sure that it's seen. Okay, now, first and foremost, I think that sometimes things are easy to be able to look at. And first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about Kerr Kriisa. Now, as you talked about John Schuster, I feel like I'm talking with Bruno right now. As you talked about John Schuster, Bruno's the dog who's very fond of Schuster. I wasn't overly concerned about Kerr Kriisa, only because when you look at him, when you looked at his shots, the form looked solid. A lot of the shots were kind of in and out. It looked like a guy, and I talked about this with our guy Matty M yesterday, Matt Muehlbach, that it wouldn't surprise me at all if you went 7 of 9 from 3 in a game, and that's almost what you saw here. So I am going to pat Mike Luke on the shoulder a little bit.
Wow, way to hedge your bet. You know, that's some good inside DraftKings information there. On one hand, Mike Luke saying that Arizona's a terrible 3-point shooting team that isn't going to be able to shoot consistently from beyond the arc. And then, with his good pal Matty M, they're now best of buds, going way back all the way to their Kansas City days.
Not many people know that.
Not many people know that. I mean, the Luke and the Muehlbach family go so far back in the Midwest. Then Matty M moves to the Bay Area, and you're out hanging out with him on a fairly regular basis, convincing him to go to the University of Arizona. It's an incredible story that just isn't told nearly enough. But on one hand, you're saying that Arizona's a terrible 3-point shooting team. On the other hand, you're hanging out with Matty M saying there's a guy on Arizona who can shoot threes really well. So I think you've done an excellent job covering your bases here. Well done, Mike Luke. Okay, so
we just had let's see here. We had Jesus Vaz say, I know this is a basketball segment, but do you plan on bringing a football one to do with recruiting? And yes, we will do that, just not tonight, but I will have that for you next week. You have my word. All right. So Schuster, you've seen a lot of good U of A basketball over the years. And there's two things for me that always point to a really good team. How you play against other really good teams, duh. And you know what? Wiping the floor with the teams that you should wipe the floor with. Arizona still hasn't played a lot of great teams. I still believe that Michigan is a lot better than they've looked recently, and I believe that they'll be there at the end of the season. But it's fair to say that Arizona hasn't played a murderer's row yet. But what Arizona has done is they've played teams that they've needed to beat down, and they've beat each one of these teams down. And quite frankly, it's been a little Olsen-esque in that they've just taken the life out of these teams. This game, and Nick Howard made a good point. He asked me, he said, what did you think about the line today? And I said, I liked Wyoming with the points. That's why you don't listen to Mike Luke when it comes to betting.
Did you really say that?
I did. I like Wyoming with the points. I like Wyoming with 17.
16.5. It's a lot of points. Yeah.
That is a lot of points. And I looked at them and I thought this was a decent team. But,
which they are.
Yeah. But Nick Howard said, Mike, they looked terrible in the first half. And, well, yes, they did look terrible in the first half. So
and Arizona looked awesome in the first half.
Yeah, but that's what Arizona.
I'm sorry.
Right. No, you're good. Arizona has to be able to beat down the teams that they need to be able to beat down. And that is one thing that we can cross off so far early in this season.
One of the things you and I chatted about on another platform a couple weeks ago, and I was kind of uncomfortable saying it because of the, reverent territory that it is that Arizona is playing kind of Great Alaska Shootout-esque.
Oh, yeah.
This has a lot of 19, and no comparison is perfectly parallel, so it's a terrible idea to make exact parallel comparisons.
Oh, I'm
which is
holding
one of the
this.
frustrating, thank you, as you should, which is one of the frustrations when everybody, and you've dealt with this around the Arizona fan base as well, there's always something. This team reminds me of 1997. This team reminds me of 1997. This team,
stop. No, it doesn't.
Stop.
It does not remind you of
so I'm now ridiculing that and about to say, at least with a qualifier, that there are aspects of this that have 1988 elements to them. And one of the major aspects about that, the two comparisons that come to mind, is that this is an Arizona team that came out of nowhere and is blowing people out and is winning games by impressive, dominant fashion. You've talked to Kevin O'Neill a lot. You like Kevin O'Neill.
We do.
KO
like
was,
Kevin O'Neill too.
Was obviously instrumental in Arizona's rise to prominence in 1988. When I make reference, for those who are unaware, about the Great Alaska Shootout, Arizona's prominence as a basketball school happened at a tournament called, at the time, again, this is 1988. The tournament was known as the Great Alaska Shootout. It was a very significant tournament at the time. 4 teams went up there. You played a couple games in Alaska. Usually you had good competition, and as a result, Alaska got some great games. You had some fun up there as well. Arizona played a couple games up there against teams that were highly regarded and absolutely blew them off the floor in some of the more impressive exhibition of college basketball that you can get. If you look at the first half of tonight's game as an example, and again, Wyoming is not those teams in 1988, and this team is not 1988. But that first half against Wyoming tonight was pretty damn good. And it allowed them to kind of float to the finish line in the second half, but they do a lot of things really well, and their metrics are backing it up. They're first in a lot of consistent categories. Their defense is ridiculous. They gave up 22 points at the half.
Yeah.
Again, they held a team into the 60s defensively, and it gives Tommy Lloyd an opportunity to kind of complain that Wyoming scored 43 in the second half,
right?
And was never in the game.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So there are elements of what Arizona is doing right now that is so dangerously impressive that if this continues for another month, the secret is going to be out. The only concern that popped up in 1988, and this became kind of the foundation of what was known as the early Lute Olsen mantra. Mantra is the wrong word. It was kind of the thing that he got credited with, is that Arizona was really good in November, really good in December, and then as the season moved along, other teams got better faster, and by the end of the year kind of caught up to where Arizona was. Lute Olson later in his career was a little bit different. Arizona was a lot more traditional. Still trying to figure it out in November, improving in December, trying to get ready for the conference season. By about mid-February, they're pretty close to peaking, and you know what you have heading into the tournament. The early era Arizona teams in 1988 certainly plays under this category. Was a team that was so more advanced than everybody else it faced in November in the early portion of the season that they obliterated the competition. Now, 88 specifically obliterated most of the competition all the way through the end of the year, but other teams closed the gap, and we know what happened, Final Four, Oklahoma, etc. So as this season moves along, maybe that's going to be a trend here, but Arizona is playing so much better and looks so good doing it than everybody else that has seen this season that the secret is out. This is not a mystery anymore. Yeah, and they keep absolutely obliterating people in a way that's going to get them a lot of deserved attention.
I'm gonna be very curious to see what that Illinois line is for Saturday. I'll bet you, because it's a road game for Arizona, it's gonna be like Illinois -1.5, something like that. But that's gonna be
Illinois going to be favored.
I think they might be favored. Yes,
I think Arizona's going to go into this at about 4.5.
Yeah, all right. Well, there you know. Hey, and if that is the case, that would be your DraftKings pick of the week right there, if that actually is the case. Let me ask you this. Mike Zuniga says Illinois -7. He's much closer to you, Shu, than me. Mike Zuniga.
See, Mike differs than me. I think Arizona's going to be the favorite.
Oh, no, my bad. Yes, exactly.
I think Arizona's going to be the favorite in this game.
Okay, that's going to be a fun one to watch right here. Now, let me ask you this, and I know you hate comparisons, and it's funny.
Sure.
John Schuster,
the guy who just made comparisons, hates comparisons, but yes.
But anyway. I am about to make. I think this is a better comparison, and just hear me out here. You and I think both agree, or at least you should if you don't, that 2001 is the best team in school history, just top to bottom.
Yeah,
I believe
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this team to me is definitely not 2001. I'm not saying that. But I am saying from a roster/personnel perspective, I think that might be a little bit of a better comparison. You got
I see on your screen that Steve R is saying the same things. And I agree with both of you. But anyway, go ahead, Mike.
Because you got Lauren Woods, Coloco, those comparisons write themselves. Tubelis, Michael Wright, both lefties, similar impacts. Benn Mathurin, Richard Jefferson. The difference, though, is that 01 still had a significantly better backcourt. There's no Gilbert Arenas on this team, and that's not a put down to this team. There's no Gilbert Arenas, and honestly, even though I think Kerr Kriisa can play better, he's not Jason Gardner. So I think the front court actually matches up fairly well with 01, but I think it falls apart a little bit in the backcourt. But I do like that comparison, though, John Schuster.
I think part of that comparison, it's interesting. Steve R there in the comments is saying that personnel-wise, he sees it a lot like 2001. I think there are two kind of style similarities. There's one person comparison specifically. Mike has touched on it, and there's a style similarity that fits a little bit more with 2001, and they both connect with each other. Arizona can expand its defense this year because they have a person in the middle who can anchor things and get block shots and at least divert shots a little bit and make things difficult for the other team on the inside. The Coloco-Woods comparison in that regard allows those teams to be able to expand defensively. And when they expand defensively, it allows for the two specific teams to score easily in transition. Arizona did that again tonight. Wyoming had a bunch of turnovers. Arizona turned those turnovers into points. The 2001 team was able to extend their defense, get a lot of transition buckets as a result of steals, and dominate teams as that season moved along. Again, in a different way than 88 did, in a different way that team didn't play nearly as well in November for a variety of reasons that this team is playing now. But the style of play at the end of the year, I think, had a lot to do with the centers. Lauren Woods allowed Arizona to extend its defense in 01. Christian Coloco allows Arizona to expand and extend its defense in 2021. So I think those aspects are exactly right. I also think, Mike, you're right about Arizona being better in the backcourt, but Arizona's depth on the wings with this team gives it all kinds of versatility, and that's obviously a very nice thing to see.
Yes, it's very nice to see. Now, Jose Roman, I think, has an interesting question here. By the way, real quick, DraftKings. Here's the deal. If you're not on DraftKings, what are you doing? DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. You throw down $1 on an NFL game. If either team scores, you get $100 in free plays. It's really that simple. And you know what? If it works for me, if it works for Schuster, it can work for you. A lot of good stuff going on right now. NBA, NFL, college basketball, college football. That's just the way it is. So hop on there. And you know what? 21 and up, Arizona only. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Eligibility restrictions do apply. Check out DraftKings Sportsbook. Code word PHNX. Get everything you need right there. Jose Roman says, "Shu, do you feel the more film this team puts out, schools will be able to prepare better? Teams are going to give this squad more adversity and punches in the mouth?"
Yes, without a doubt. And we talked about this in our post game after Oregon State. And one of the things that I was surprised about with Oregon State in the early going, and kind of surprised, well, I guess, I don't know if surprise is the right word. Wyoming just wasn't able to do it. And Arizona blitzkrieged them with 3-pointers and put the game away pretty early. Is I think teams are going to try to do one of two things against Arizona. They're generally speaking, if we look ahead to the Illinois game, I think there's going to be a very key matchup on the inside that a lot of people are going to pay attention to. And one of the concerns tonight is that Wyoming's big man got Arizona's bigs into some foul trouble. Illinois' big is really unique and could be a problem. It's a problem for a lot of people. It could be a problem for Arizona as well. The Cats hope to avoid foul trouble because getting rebounds is imperative for Arizona's running game to be successful. So you want Coloco to be on the floor. You want Ballo to be able to be on the floor to counteract that and help Arizona to get out and run. But I think teams are going to do one of two things depending on the personnel that they have. For instance, let's use the LA trip in January as an example. SC's got a lot of length. They play defensively. I think they're going to try to make the game ugly. They're going to slow down tempo, and it'll be interesting to see how successful they ultimately are at doing that. Teams are going to try to slow tempo. If they have good guard play, they may be able to do that, because Arizona right now is doing two things that allows it to get out into transition. The two things that always happen. You force turnovers, you get rebounds on the defensive end, you push it. Arizona has forced turnovers. They score off turnovers at a better clip than anybody else in the country. They're doing a good job on the glass. When they get rebounds, they push tempo, they get up the floor. But teams with the personnel that like to run are going to test Arizona's defensive transition defense. And if they can run in that capacity with Arizona and push things in that regard, I think the surprise here is that you're going to see teams trying to run with Arizona, and there may be a few out there that can successfully do that. And if they can beat Arizona in transition defense, then the U of A's ability to counter that may not be as dramatic as we've seen in these games so far, where Arizona goes on big spurts and big runs.
Let me ask you this though: you've been following a lot of Gonzaga basketball, and we've joked around about this over the years. And by the way, there's a lot of times that John Schuster is actually right on stuff where I'm not right on things. And I have been basically a Gonzaga denier to a certain extent for the last 4 or 5 years. And you know what? Here, it's okay to be able to say that, you know what, I was wrong. But the one thing that Schuster has said for the last 4 or 5 years in his admiration of Gonzaga is the style in which they play, the way they pass, the way they spread the court is very unique in college basketball. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now with Arizona. Can you explain, though, kind of in a little bit more detail what you've been telling me for about 5 years now? Because I think it's a great point.
Part of what Arizona does, or what Gonzaga does, is that when they're on the offensive end, they're very specific. They never stop. There's always movement, which is great, and there's always passing. But they have a really intrinsic understanding of angles. They're the best geometry program in the country, as weird as that sounds. They understand spacing on the floor, but not just spacing on the floor. They'll do little things like the way that they pass the ball inside, from guard to inside. Most teams have sort of a linear A to B approach. I'm here. Let's do it this way.
Right.
I'm passing the ball to Mike Luke. It's a straight shot. Gonzaga doesn't always do that. Gonzaga will do these kind of loop around passes that will actually push the big guy out a couple feet a little bit further. But what that does is it spaces the floor a little bit more and gives these passing bigs the opportunity to find other openings with a second pass and a third pass and a fourth pass. So they'll do some interesting, most teams that post up on the inside, then try to get the guy on the inside and the guy's going to try to score. Gonzaga and Arizona's doing this too, is looking at that as a possibility, but then they'll make an extra pass on the inside on a regular basis and very often find somebody open. Their passing on the inside is as good as anybody in the country. And that's something that I think has an opportunity to benefit Arizona. The way that they run their offense is so clearly different than most of the other teams at the college level. And it has a lot to do with angles. The angles are almost elliptical. A lot of what you see in basketball is this straight line stuff. Nothing wrong with it. But for folks in Arizona who, 15 years ago watched a lot of Steve Nash, a little bit to some degree watch a little bit of Chris Paul, it's a lot more elliptical than it is angular. And the way that seems to allow for better spacing and gives your team an opportunity to get some good looks. Tonight, Arizona started the game in a way that it usually hasn't. It started the game bombarding from three. It hasn't done that this year. It's the reason I'm giving Mike Luca all kinds of crap. But then, as things moved along, as the game progressed, Arizona did what it's done throughout the rest of the year. Got a lot of good looks on the inside. That makes things very difficult for other teams to defend. And the way that they run their stuff, the relative simplicity about it, but the understanding of how to do it is one of the many things that's impressed me about Lloyd's coaching, bringing in a completely different style, and the team already understands exactly what it is it's trying to accomplish.
You think that, what? I've given this a lot of thought, and I think sometimes when I give things a lot of thought, it's probably not the best thing in the world. But I kind of wonder, though, if the reason that this has happened so simple, this transition has been so seamless, is that, and again, this isn't meant to bash Sean Miller, because first and foremost, you got to give Sean Miller credit because this is essentially his roster. So Miller gets total kudos on this. But your point that you made time and time again still resonates with me about how sometimes basketball doesn't need to be hard. And what Lloyd is doing with this team is playing to everybody's strengths and just kind of going down the list here a little bit. Sean Seeley just said, is Koloko an NBA player at this moment? I think that's a two-part question. He's definitely going to be drafted. I don't know that he plays, but he looks like a first-round pick. But you look at all of these guys are playing to what I think they can do. Koloko is showing an improved offensive game, blocking shots, rebounding, running the court. Tubelis always, to me, it didn't really matter who was going to be the coach right there. He was going to be able to get his 16-9 just from his physicality, his way that he's able to play. Benn Mathurin, I think, has been Tommy Lloyd has been a huge addition to Benn Mathurin's game, because this is the guy, this is your stereotypical pony. This is the guy that needs to get out and run, get baskets, get easy dunks, because you know what? When he gets easy dunks, these are the guys, it helps out his entire game. And it's just easy to say, Kerr Kriisa, Dalen Terry, that's probably a little bit to be determined. But I think these guys are finding the best version of themselves under Tommy Lloyd. And I think that's because Tommy Lloyd is letting them play. I'll give you an example. Look, when Kerr Kriisa tried the the between his legs pass, where I looked immediately to Tommy Lloyd. He didn't start screaming. He didn't start fuming. You could tell that he was probably rolling his eyes, and he just looked at Kerr and he says, "Don't do that again." Sometimes, when you're dealing with 18, 19-year-olds, that's going to be the best way to get something out of them. And that, to me, was kind of the part where it's like, it's loose, it feels free, and these guys seem to be embracing it.
There may have been, and this will be one of the areas of difference, perhaps, between Olsen and Lloyd. Lloyd may be even a little bit more free flow than Olsen was, because if Kerr had thrown that pass against Olsen, he would have been yanked, and he would have gotten a serious chewing out. And Olsen, as we know, lets his players play, but he was also big on high percentage. You'd rather save the highlights for something else. The highlights are going to come. You make high percentage plays, and Arizona's going to score points, and the rest will take care of itself. So Olson would have been a lot more frustrated with that, and I think visually frustrated than even Lloyd was, who did a much better job. And again, it helps when you're leading by 30 and dominating a game. And Lloyd will probably have a conversation that's fairly similar to that. Miller's persona may have been entirely different. We may not have seen Kerr for the rest of the night after a pass like that. Of course, in Miller's offense, we maybe never would have seen anything like that.
Might not have never seen that again.
Speaking of that to some degree, the more that we see this team perform, and again, there's a long road ahead this year, and there's a long road ahead in this program. Obviously, things are going remarkably well right now. But do you look back in frustration with wishing that Tommy Lloyd had coached the Aaron Gordon teams?
Well,
and the Hollis Jefferson team.
Let's talk about
Nick
that.
Johnson team.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine when you've got those kind of athletes that would be able to shoot gaps? Where you've got T.J. McConnell setting the table, then you've got Nick Johnson, Rondé Hollis Jefferson, Aaron Gordon, Tarzewski in the back end, and I think Tarzewski would have even benefited right there as well. It really does make you wonder just exactly how they could have been. Now, let me ask you this: Don McClain, who, by the way, Matty M said that he might try to give me a shout out on Pac-12 Network next time he's in studio because of the comparison that I made with Don McClain. I said he was kind of the West Coast Christian Laettner. And so Matty M liked that comparison right there, just from being a little annoying, taller white guy that was really good. You didn't really feel like he should be as good as he is. But I think Steve R hits the nail on the head right here when he said Don McClain just said, what high school kid is looking at this and not saying, I want to play that way? This tape sells itself.
Yeah, it should. And I have there's a big transcendent change that's taking hold in college basketball. The transfer portal is going to change the game dramatically. And I think we're seeing in some of the inconsistency with teams that you talked about Michigan as an example, or you think Michigan's going to get better.
I do.
I think you're right. I think a lot of these teams are going to be significantly better in the next 6 to 8 weeks because they're still trying to figure out whatever the nuances are to get up to speed. Obviously, COVID has a lot to do with that, but I think that's going to transition into the transfer portal because teams are going to be a lot different year to year to year to year to year. But with everything that I don't necessarily like, and the thing that I don't like about the transfer portal is aesthetic. I don't care about the rule necessarily so much. I understand the rule. We can talk about that later. From a fan aesthetic standpoint, I want my college basketball to look good. I think my college basketball, generally speaking, is going to look a lot worse in November and December from here on out and into perpetuity. However, where there are different circumstances, there are also opportunities. Arizona with Tommy Lloyd is an opportunity program. Steve is right, and quoting Don McClain is right. You watch what Arizona's doing, you really like it. And that doesn't necessarily just mean high school kids. That means kids who are in other programs who feel a little bit restricted, and a lot of the foreign kids who are, who Lloyd has a lot of connection with. To some degree, are you ready for this one, Mike?
What do you got? Talk to me. I love this.
You could call it Eurozona. Yeah, that was awful.
I am posting that on Twitter right now, and I'm going to give you
as you should, because that completely bombed, but it's genius all at the same time. So, nevertheless, there are a lot of different veins as I completely transition while you ruin all of my credibility on Twitter, which I have none of. So, fortunately, that's not going to be very difficult. There are different veins that Arizona can tackle.
Arizona's such trash.
that give the Cats an opportunity to almost be in pick and choose mode, depending on how they want to put their team together. Obviously, Arizona needs to recruit better at the high school level, but they're also going to be in a position where they can find a lot of players out there who they think fits well into a system that hopefully year in and year out is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
All right, Shu, before before we wrap this up, what's great about the AZ Wildcats podcast is we've got the best people on here. And you know what? Tomorrow we've got Brian Jeffries. I'm just going to call him Brian Jeffries. I'm not going to call him.
You don't have any fancy name for Brian Jeffries?
I don't know.
B-Jeff? You've got B-Jeff on the show tomorrow?
I do have B. You know what? Maybe I'll try to drop a B-Jeff.
I'm sure that's going to work. I'm sure that's going to work wonderfully.
But we do have a special surprise for you. It's my parents. We're celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
Saturday. Yeah. So, well, not congratulations to me. Congratulations to them. But
that was congratulations to them, not congratulations to you.
They are big fans of John Schuster. But John Schuster and William Brad Alice will be on hosting the game against Illinois. And it'll be interesting. Yes. So, you know what? Two guys that are synonymous with each other are going. And by the way, this is great. Nick Howard just says, call him the voice of Eurozona.
Hashtag Eurozona.
But everybody out there.
A t-shirt. You need to start a DraftKings t-shirt with that one.
Right. We got well over 125 comments here. You guys are awesome. We try to get to as many of them as we can. Can't thank you all enough for hopping on this. Schuster, you're the man. You're coming over tomorrow. I got to give you some cash, and we got to record some stuff. So,
well, you have to give me a cash because you're going to try to buy Eurozona from me before I trademark it.
Let's not act like that hasn't possibly been trademarked already. But everybody out there, again, we really appreciate all of you. Thanks for listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, and we will be back with you tomorrow.